This begins COMM 45, Section 83, Vlog Discussion 8. Today's readings were mostly about culture and what it means to fit in, or how to find your own identity. The first one, an argument for being a poser. It talks about how every young person eventually wants to find out or where they fit in. But the argument with that is it's pretty hard to find where someone fits in, because in the modern age especially, because we're exposed to all types of media, so we have a lot of different identities within one person. Like for me personally, I'm an Asian American, but I identify more as an American than I do being a Chinese. But at the same time, I'm very proud of my Chinese heritage, and I'm not really American in the sense that I enjoy American things like sports or Sunday night football, church, all that. But I still identify with both because that's how I see who I am. And the reading also addresses this by stating how even if you don't know where you completely belong, that's completely fine. You should try different communities out, see where you fit in, and you can basically just see where you want to become. And that's a really good way of looking at it, because worst case scenario that you really only just keep looking for new communities. As for the second reading, the N-word is flourishing among Generation Hip Hop Latinos. That one is kind of it was an interesting read for me, because for me personally, as a young person living in a very diverse place, I do hear the N-word a lot being dropped, not just in conversation here, but also in media. And it's become a sort of white noise to me. Because before, it used to be a kind of taboo word based on the meaning I learned from it. But over time, it kind of, as I heard more and more people use it, it kind of developed a sort of different meaning. It's kind of, for me, I understand it as a word of companionship as opposed to what it's historically known for, as a kind of oppressive word with a lot of negative history. But in a way, the way it's used these days, it's more of a positive word, because it means it's used in the same context as dude, for example. But that's not to say everyone should use it, but what I'm trying to say is it should not be viewed as negatively in the modern era, because it's taken on a new meaning with new cultures being brought out. For the third reading, The End of White America, this one was a little bit confusing for me, but what I mostly got from it was white supremacy has been a thing ever since colonization began, ever since the Puritans set foot in America. But with the rise of globalization in the recent years, America is no longer just that one white identity. It's mostly made up of all different types of cultures. It's a whole melting pot, as they would say. And even in the reading, it stated that research or a prediction shows that by 2042, the minorities, which in this case include Africans, Mexicans, Asians, all that, will become the majority by then, and white people will become the minority, which is interesting to say the least. But the way it's presented and the way white people talk about it, or old conservative white people talk about it, they talk about it like it's not really a good thing, like they're losing power. But that's kind of been the way it's been kind of shown throughout history. Land of the free really only applies to white people and land of the free applies to everyone as long as the white people get the bigger slice of the cake, as far as I'm aware. And even now, especially with all the cultures flying around, the concept of whiteness, not really as a race, but like as a concept, is being very muddled. There is like, as I talked about in the reading, there is very uniqueness to being white. A lot of people who are white, they talk about not really having a culture. They don't really have like any uniqueness to them, whereas every other culture, they have their own traditions, their own cultures, their own communities, all that. But when it comes to white people, they stated that they don't really have something they can be proud of. And it's also interesting that the concept of being white has been somewhat villainized. Like, it mentioned this in the reading, but if we were to say like black power, Asian power, Mexican power, that those words bring a sort of empowerment because these are somewhat minority groups. But when someone mentions white power, that's when things get a little icky because it's linked to white supremacy and a sort of, in my opinion, it kind of loosely relates to the KKK when it comes to white supremacy and white power. And it just carries a negative meaning, whereas it's only one word change in difference. So in short, it's strange being white in America despite its history. And then lastly, for the last reading, the sports taboo, it discussed how there was a lot of stigma and overall, what's the word? There's a lot of stigma and a lot of, I forgot what the word was, but it's like personal inflections. It's how people view themselves, but that exists in sports, but it's not based on like genetics or ability, but instead it's based on like race and ethnicity. People have made the differences in the abilities in sports based on race and ethnicity, even though it's all physical differences due to, let's say, different environments, different upbringings, and different ways they were raised. So let's say, for example, the most prominent example is comparing a white person to an African American person. They have completely different upbringings, they have completely different environments they were born in, and they enjoy doing different things as they grew up. These are obviously going to affect their athletic ability, but yet race is still being considered when it comes to talking about this. And that's kind of strange, in my opinion. It all falls down to a genetic difference. Africans, as discussed, were naturally more genetically diverse, but we tend to really only focus on like the athletically elite part of Africans. And there's a study that was mentioned in reading, when we focus on a specific margin, we have a very lopsided view of the whole picture, and that could lead to us developing, a sort of internalized racism based on what we see in other people compared to us. But once we look at like the whole picture, we start to notice patterns and become more and more aware of what things truly are. For example, like, there are a lot of elite black athletes, but there are just as many, if not more, black people who fall off really fast off the other end of the athletic spectrum. So it's not really about race, but it's rather about how we look at the data. And in the end, it's all about how we view these people. It's all about worldview and mindset. And if in the world of athletics, those people who want to achieve, the people who want to achieve greatness, they tend to chase it a lot more than people who are born with just talent but don't really have a use for it. And ambition and talent go hand in hand, not one really replaces the other.